Your child will never be able to walk in his lifetime. These were the words doctor told my parents when I was merely 6 months old, the age in which I didn't even know what walking means. I am a survivor of this planet's deadliest epidemic called polio, which broke out in north part of India in 1973. It has taken lives of thousands and thousands of victims. And those few who survived, like me, were left with irreversible permanent paralysis, no ability to walk, deformed limbs, breathing difficulties, and there was no cure anywhere on the planet. But surviving polio was just the beginning of the challenges that were waiting for me eagerly. At the age of 5, when I started gaining some awareness, I found myself crawling on the floor on my arms to make any movement. At the age of 7, I found myself dragging my iron-clad leg braces to go to school. At the age of 11, I found myself painstakingly trying to walk with crutch to stand straight. But physical challenges were not the big deal. The real challenges were social in nature. Because of my disability, I couldn't be part of the things which typically kids will do in that age. I couldn't be part of games, sports, running around. So I had no playmates. I had no friends. I got on my social experience from those who loved chasing me, who loved making fun of me, who loved copying me. But the thing is, those were the times when I was asking myself question or questioning my family, why me? My mother is a religious lady, and she used to say, is some bad karma in your previous life? That karma logbook I haven't been able to find yet. But despite that missing karma logbook, at the young age of 20, I became an electronics engineer. At the age of 21, 22, I became a geoscientist, not one with the long beard. Later, I earned over a century of educational and international credentials. A century. I have 2 doctorates without going insane or without growing gray long hairs. I have written 18 books, and I have traveled around the world unassisted. And this is just a trailer list. And now I see many of you leaning forward, wondering how I accomplished all this despite my disability that has the ability to stop me every single day. But let me tell you one thing. Physical disability is nothing. I still have it, as you see it. There was other kind of limitations, which later I realized every one of us has, disabled or not. I call it as thought limitations. Thinking of helplessness. I can't do anything about this. This is the way it's going to be. Thinking about self-pity. I won't fit anywhere. Thinking about self-doubt. Nobody's going to accept me. Thinking something like, I'm not good enough. These are the thought limitations. You may have known them as weaknesses, challenges, failures, inferiority complexes. But all of those are thought limitations. These thought limitations lead to self-imposed limits, which we put on ourselves. And those limits then, it stops us. It doesn't let us use full potential. It holds us back. The irony is that we sometimes don't even realize how damaging those limitations are on us. So all the things I accomplished, going back to the question, I had to actually overcome these thought limitations. Today, I am going to share 3 lessons with you from my life how you can understand your limitations holistically and turn them around into advantage. My first lesson is look deep. Is it real or perceived? You see, we humans have fighting instincts. Whenever something blocks us, we love to fight. We get on to fight immediately. But how would you fight with someone you don't know about? So, lesson I learned is when you come across a limitation or holdback, you need to understand nature and composition of what you're up against. See beyond the obvious. Let me take you back to my childhood. Because of disability, I was confined into a room. And in that room, there was a window that used to open into street and playground. Morning till evening, I will watch kids playing. More I watched them, more I felt bad about my inability to walk. You're never going to be part of that crowd. They're never going to accept you. You are not good enough. You can never match pace with them. These were the voices I heard in my head every day, every week, as the time goes on. One day I started believing those voices. And soon I started labeling myself as a social reject. And I went into a shell of shyness, introversion, fear, and very soon, practically, I became socially isolated. At surface, you might think that my, my social isolation came because of disability. But if you look deep, this weak leg had very little contribution. The real culprits were the thinking, emotional, psychological, and mental thinking I had formed in my head. Those were the thought limitation I had, triggered through my negative self-talk and amplified through my victim stories. My victim story was that I'm a social reject. What is your victim story? What story you are telling yourself? My story triggered from comparing myself with the able-bodied kids. How your victim stories are triggering. You see, your environment is no different than mine. You are being exposed to undue competition, unjust criticism, constant comparisons. Every one of us have some imperfections. Some have mental, some have physical, don't we? And when these imperfection comes in contact with these 3 elements of environment, criticism, comparison, and competition, these become over-amplified, perceived limitation, which is formed in your brain, in your mind. And soon, you start imposing limits on yourself. You start developing limited mindset. You start developing limited self-belief about yourself. And soon those things will limit or restrict movement of your life, physically as well as emotionally. Is it some sort of disability, isn't it? But the more damaging thing is that the effect of these perceived limitation, you get into stress, anxiety, self-damage, health issues, performance issues, career issues, you name anything. So we need to get out of this loop. Simple mantra which I followed, how I got out of that loop was, look deep. Look deep, is it real or perceived? And part of that one, you have to answer some questions. You have to look beyond the obvious. In my case, at the surface, it looked like it was physical disability, but that wasn't true. You have to look at what triggered it, where it got started, and then you find the real culprit. And once you find the real culprit, then you move on to the next lesson I'm going to share. And the next lesson is look through. What's on the other side? When we fight with our limitation, our vision gets obscure. We don't even know why we are trying to break that wall. We need to understand what's behind that wall. When I asked this question to my younger self, what was my goal back then? Was it to walk normally like other kids? The answer comes is no. Because at one point of time, I understood it's going to be a permanent part of me. Then what was my goal? My goal was social belongingness, to be part of that crowd, to fit into that crowd, to be able to prove more than my disability, to be known for more than what I couldn't do. So you see, when we come across a limitation, we need to understand our vision, what's on the other side. And that will drive our desire to go on the other side. And in my case, once the definition of success became clear to me, what my goal is, I started doing more. I started learning more. I started proving more. So the trailer list we talked about earlier, that was grounded in this perspective of doing more. So lesson I want to share with you is that when you come across a limitation, you have to understand, you have to look through that wall. Try to understand your limitation, what's on the other side, how the success looks like to you. And once you do that, you also need to understand, does it mean to you? Do you even want to go other side? And part of this one, you also need to ask a question is, whether your limitations are indeed coming your way into your goals. In my case, I wanted to do more. And my physical disability was no way coming on my way. So that's the clarity you need. And once you understand that you want to go on the other side, then you go on to the next perspective, which I'm going to share, which is look wide and around. If not this, what else? What I realize is in my life that when we start coming across a limitation, it's basically blocks our peripheral vision. We're so focused and engrossed on our disabilities or weaknesses or holdbacks that we don't see around. Maybe there are some opportunities or windows opened around it. Remember that window I used to sit in front, I used to feel bad. But at one point of time I said, this is part of me. So what less I can do? The answer was, I could feel less bad. And then I started looking at my limitation in a much wider perspective. What I was put into. I had no mobility. That means I had, for hours and hours, I could sit like this. And I had no social interaction. That also means I didn't have any social distractions. I was confined into a space. That means nobody is going to come and disturb my universe. So what all this gave me, all of this gave me plenty of distraction-free, interruption-free time. So the question then I asked myself is, what more I can do with that? First thing that came is, I could read more. So I started reading magazine, newspaper, whatever I came across. And soon this opened up my world for books. And books opened up my whole universe, whole vision into the universe. And I started reading everything. I started learning things, physics, geoscience, political science, arts. I even learned palmistry, astrology, face reading. You name anything, there was no boundary. And then I asked the question, what else? I had healthy hands. I could do writing. I could do sketching, painting. I could do many other things. And then I asked, what else more I can do? I had liberty to do daydreaming. Not many people get that liberty, isn't it? So I ran my vivid imagination, creative thinking, and soon I started putting on paper. And I started writing poetry, articles, you name anything. You see, very simple mantra which I used is, what else? If not this, what else? I leveraged every possible opportunity my disability offered me. I leveraged every possible window that it opened for me. So the lesson I want to share with you is when you come across a limitation, don't get too engrossed trying to fight with the limitation. Answer the question, if not this, what else? Look wide and around. But part of that one, you also need to answer two questions. What less of something you could do? What more of something you could do? Once you do that, a tremendous breakthrough is going to come to your life. Ladies and gentlemen, once my friend jokingly told me, Raman, whatever you achieved, only you could achieve. Maybe your third virtual leg is giving you some kind of superpower. But thing is, if this leg is limitation, this crutch is a leverage. I didn't need a superpower. We humans have tremendous potential and capability. We can make our way through anything difficult. We do not need any superpower. All we need is clarity. Clarity is the new superpower in today's world. Clarity about understanding your limitation holistically. We need to look deep. Is it real? We need to look through what's on the other side. We need to look wide and around. If not this, what else? Once we follow these three practices, there are a lot of things that's going to change. Your limitations is going to become your advantages. Many times we do get this advice, break your boundaries, whatever is holding you back. What I believe is you don't have to necessarily break the boundaries. Sometimes windows can be right through those boundaries, which is going to give you the access to the other world. We just need to find those leverages, those windows, those opportunities. And that's how you convert your limitation into your advantages. Remember, Les Brown says, life has no limitation except the ones you make. Thank you so much for having me.